Hello dear students, a hearty welcome for the second part of Where There Is a Wheel that we were discussing, written by P. Sainath as informed earlier. Well, let us have a recapitulation about the uniqueness of the title was explained, about the author was mentioned, who P. Sainath is, pre-reading activity that was done for you all in the previous session, cycling as a social movement, how cycling was considered as social movement was discussed, and how cycle was a blessing to the women of Pudukkottai. Let us continue from where we had left. The next subheading that we have is ARIVOLI IYAKKAM. ARIVOLI IYAKKAM is in Tamil, which means the light of knowledge. The light of knowledge is what ARIVOLI IYAKKAM means. When the light of knowledge movement had taken place in Pudukkottai, the district's literacy drive, which was quick to tap the enthusiasm for cycling. In one hand, cycling was a new trend that was happening in Pudukkottai, and this particular movement called the Light of Knowledge, that in Tamil Arivoli Iyakkam, was taking place. The new literate, neo-cyclist women saw a direct link between cycling and their personal independence. So the neo-literates means those who are newly educated, and the neo-cyclist, that is the newly the people who, the women who had learned cycling newly, saw direct link between cycling and their personal independence. Ian Kannamal is one of the personalities here mentioned in the chapter. Arivoli Central Coordinator and one of the pioneers of the cycling movement, said cycling provides them confidence. These three things is what N. Kanamal mentions here. Cycling for the women of Pudukkottai provides confidence. Second one, it reduces dependence on men, that is on father, on son, on husband, on brother. Whatever the dependency is to be seen, that dependence on men can be reduced if one learn cycling. They had to tolerate filthy remarks, but Arivoli gave cycling social sanction, so women took to it. Though there were people who flung filthy remarks, but still women went on to continue learning cycling because it was Arivoli Iyakkam had given a social sanction to it. Moving further, continuing with Arivoli Iyakkam, Arivoli had come up with cycling training camp. In Kilakuruchi, it was such an unusual experience to see the learners in their Sunday best, exhibiting sheer passion for pro-cycling movement. Every Sunday, Arivoli put up a camp, a cycling training camp for women of this region, and people flocked in from various different parts of this district to take part in this pro cycling movement. It offered them a way out of enforced routines around male imposed barriers. What are male imposed barriers? You might have come across in various stages of woman's life. She is told not to do this, not to do that. People will think wrongly about you if you do that. These are the comments that were passed by the male section of the society. So these males who had imposed barriers were not were now not paid heed to because women had come out of these routines and they were participating in cycling movement. The next subheading is master trainers. Well, women were the trainers, but still they were called master trainers. So this was a thing that was not going down quite easily for the women there, but still they were named master trainers. These are trained cyclists who return to train the new learners. They work free of charge for ARIVOLI. There is a widespread perception that all women ought to learn cycling. So this particular thought was instilled in the women of Pudukkottai that one had to learn cycling in order to be free, independent, and mobile. In turn, their experience has enriched the literacy movement because of their contribution, which was so invaluable that their experience enriched the literacy movement in Pudukkottai. Moving further, SHEELA RANI CHUNKATH'S contribution. Who she is? Let us get to know. She was the former district collector. In 1991, it was her brainchild to train female activists so that literacy could reach women in the interior. She introduced mobility as a part of the literacy drive to boost their confidence. If one has to study, if one has to educate, then mobility is one of the vital things that one should be given with. So, women there were not so mobile, were not so independent. So, SHEELA RANI CHUNKATH took it to herself in order to provide this particular mobility so that the women could be trained and could be educated. She pushed the banks to give loans to the women to buy cycles. She also got each block to accept specific duties in promoting the drive. As a top official, she gave it great personal attention. She, being a woman herself, saw to it that she gave it a personal attention and things were possible majorly because of her attention towards this particular drive. Next up, the unstoppable women. Why were these women called unstoppable? There's a major reason to it. Every woman wanted to learn cycling, and that led to a shortage of ladies' cycles. So one could easily stop at this because ladies' cycles were in shortage. But These women were called unstoppable because they had started riding the giant cycles, and some women preferred it as it had an additional bar from the seat to the handle. They could seat a child on that. So it was quite a different cycle as compared to lady cycle. These women started riding these gent cycle, and most of them preferred to own gent cycle as compared to lady cycles because it had an additional bar to it. In 1992, on the International Women's Day, the town's inhabitants were stunned by the rally of over 1,500 female cyclists, flags on handlebars, and bells ringing. So they were on the roads of the town as they took a cycling rally. 1,500 of them had participated, and this was a prominent thing that was noticed on the International Women's Day. They were here to mark a statement. S. Kanakarajan, owner of Ram Cycles, saw a rise of over 350%. This is a staggering number in the sale of lady cycles in a year. In just a single year, there was a hike of 350% in the sale of lady cycles. This was a huge number. Selfless profferers is the next subheading. Muthu Bhaskaran, a male Arivoli activist who was quite encouraging. He wrote the famous cycling song that became their anthem. There were many men who were flinging filthy remarks on these women who were taking up cycling, but there were few good souls like Muthu Bhaskaran. Being a male himself, he in fact supported these women, who was Arivoli activist himself, and contributed a cycling song that went on to become an anthem for these women. Manurmani, a quarry worker and an Arivoli volunteer, thought it to be vital for her co-workers to learn cycling as their areas were a little cut off and cycling could help them be mobile. As I said earlier, for few it was freedom, for few it was independence, and for few people like Manormani and her co-workers, the cycling provided mobility. So they were not dependent dependent any further for the buses or for the drop that they would get from their male members of in their family. UNICEF, at the public exhibition cum contest run by Arivoli in a single week in 1992, more than 70,000 women displayed their bicycling skill. So what UNICEF did was, as it was quite impressed, sanctioned 50 mopeds for Arivoli women activists so that they could do this work in a proper way and they could get better results out of it. Arivoli sanctioned 50 mopeds for them. So these are the selfless profferers, selfless contributors to Arivoli. Implications of cycling. What were the implications? Let us look at economic implications. Women can sell agricultural or other produce within a group of villages and could reach poorly connected routes as well. Whatever produce they had, they could easily sell them within a group of villages because cycling helped them in mobility. It, it gives an individual more time to focus on selling their produce. Because transportation was sorted now, they could focus on selling their produce. It enlarges the area one can hope to cover. So, in a day, if they were covering a particular distance, now they could cover double of it because they had this provision of cycling. It can also increase the leisure time because they could get the work done faster. They could come home and can increase the leisure time. Personal implications. As far as personal implications are concerned, those who were dependent on male member to even reach the bus stops do not have to do so. Now they were not dependent on the male members of the family to even reach the bus stops because they had a cycle and they were fit enough to cycle. Some women had to rush back only to tend to the children and perform other chores. These women now combine different tasks with nonchalance. Effortlessly, they were performing a lot of work courtesy cycling. They could they could come back early and they could tend to the children and perform other chores. Along some remote road, a young mother can be seen, child on the bar, produce along the carrier. She could be seen carrying 2 or 3 pots of water hung across the back, cycling towards work or home. So, cycle was doing so much more for these women. Bicycle, metaphor for freedom. So, bicycle was considered as a metaphor for freedom. The sense of self respect cycling brings is vital. So, if the women knew how to cycle, they considered themselves as privileged because their self esteem was held high. Fatima said, "It is not just economy, but the feeling of independence and goodness it gives is priceless." So, for the women who knew cycling, they were not dependent, they were quite free, and they had a lot of self esteem because of their mobility. They were not obligated to anybody, not even to their family members anymore. Kanamal said it is a Himalayan achievement like flying an aeroplane for these women. People may laugh, only the women know how important cycling is. For these women, they had undergone a lot from the society and especially the men who flung filthy remarks and uh, they were up against a lot of criticism also, the women, but only they knew how important cycling is for them. So they continued with cycling. So with this, we come to the end of the chapter. P. Sainath mentions a postscript here. When he returned to Pudukkottai in April 1995, he found that the craze was still on. The craze for cycling was still on. Still, a large number of women were unable to afford bicycles as the cost had increased from 1200 to 1400 rupees. This is a huge number as far as the rural women of Pudukkottai district are concerned, because this is a huge number for them. 1200 rupees was now 1400 rupees per cycle, so they were finding it hard to afford a bicycle. But Pudukkottai remains unique among Indian districts for the stunning proportion of women who enthusiastically took to cycling. Not many could muster this particular courage to do so in the other parts of rural India, but these women could do so because of the valor and the courage that they had. So, with this, we come to the end of yet another chapter. I hope it was beneficial enough for you people. Please go through the text once again, mark the very important terms that are there, underline the important dates and names that are there in the textbook, particularly in this particular chapter. With this, we come to the end of the penultimate content, that is the 13th one. Thank you very much for being so patient. Have a good day. Stay safe.